My wife's search history showed how to poison husband without a trace. She laughed it off as a joke. When she handed me tea, I swapped our cups. Then I faked my own collapse. She was left frantically telling to the dispatcher that I died. I, 32M, discovered something that would change everything 3 weeks ago when I borrowed my wife's laptop to check my work emails. Mine was dead, and she was in the shower, so I figured she wouldn't mind. We'd been married for 8 years, and trust had never been an issue between us. The browser opened to her last session, and there it was, a search history that made my blood freeze. How to poison husband without a trace. Untraceable poisons that cause heart attacks. How long does arsenic stay in the system? Natural ways to cause sudden death. My hands trembled as I scrolled through page after page of searches spanning the past month. Forums about undetectable murders. Articles about insurance payouts after suspicious deaths. Even a detailed post about making death look accidental. When she came out of the bathroom, I confronted her immediately. My voice shook as I asked her what the hell she was searching for. She looked at the screen for a moment, then burst out laughing. She told me it was research for a crime novel she was writing. She'd always talked about wanting to be an author, so it seemed plausible enough. She even showed me a document on her computer with a few chapters of what looked like a thriller. But something felt wrong. The searches were too specific, too focused on methods rather than plot devices. Real authors researched poisons differently. They looked up symptoms and effects for dramatic purposes, not detection methods and lethal doses. I started paying closer attention to everything. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. How she'd been asking about my life insurance policy lately, claiming she wanted to make sure we were covered properly. The fact that she'd been unusually affectionate. Almost guilty in her attention. Then I noticed the tea. She'd started bringing me tea every evening after dinner, something she'd never done before. Always the same herbal blend, always insisting I drink it while it was hot. She'd watch me take the first few sips with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When I mentioned it tasted bitter, she explained it was a new brand she'd found that was supposed to help with stress. I became paranoid about everything I ate or drank around her. I started eating lunch at work instead of the meals she packed. I'd pour out coffee when she wasn't looking and pretend to drink it. But I couldn't avoid everything without arousing suspicion. The breaking point came last Tuesday. She brought me the usual evening tea, but this time something was different. Her hands shook slightly as she set it down, and she kept glancing at me with this strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She asked if I'd eaten dinner, if I felt okay, if I had any plans for the evening. All questions that seemed innocent enough, but felt loaded with meaning. That's when I decided to test my theory. While she was in the kitchen getting herself water, I quickly switched our cups. The porcelain made barely a sound as I swapped them on the coffee table. When she returned, she sat across from me, cradling what she thought was her clean cup. I took a careful sip from mine, just enough to wet my lips, and watched her. She was studying me intently, waiting for something. After a few minutes, she lifted her own cup and took a large gulp. Nothing happened immediately. We watched television for about 20 minutes, making small talk about our days. But then I noticed her expression changing. She kept looking at me expectantly, checking her watch, asking if I felt tired or dizzy. The concern in her voice sounded forced, like she was following a script. Then she started looking confused. She touched her stomach and frowned. She took another sip of her tea, then set it down quickly. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she realized something was wrong. That's when I decided to put on the performance of my life. I stood up suddenly, clutching my chest and gasping for air. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp, and crashed to the floor. I thrashed for a few seconds, then went completely still, letting my eyes roll back and my breathing become shallow and irregular. Her reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of rushing to help me, she backed away, staring in horror. She wasn't shocked by my sudden collapse. She was shocked by the timing. She looked at her own cup of tea, then back at me, and I could see the realization dawning on her face. But then survival instinct kicked in. She grabbed her phone and dialed emergency services. Through barely opened eyes, I watched her pace frantically as she spoke to the dispatcher. She told them I had suddenly collapsed, that I wasn't breathing properly, that she thought I was having a heart attack. What came next was the most chilling part of the entire ordeal. After hanging up with emergency services, she called someone else. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she explained that something had gone wrong, that it was supposed to look like natural causes, that I wasn't supposed to collapse so dramatically. She kept saying she must have miscalculated the dose. The person on the other end must have told her to get her story straight because she spent the next few minutes rehearsing what she would tell the paramedics. She practiced crying, perfected her shocked wife routine, and even messed up her hair to look more distraught. When the ambulance arrived, her performance was flawless. She ran to them sobbing, explaining how I'd been feeling tired lately, how I'd complained about chest pains. She told them about my family history of heart problems, information that was completely fabricated since my father was still alive and healthy at 68. The paramedics worked on me for several minutes while she watched from the corner, maintaining her act. They couldn't find anything immediately wrong, so they decided to transport me to the hospital for observation. During the ride, I kept my eyes closed and my breathing labored while listening to my wife give the same fabricated story to the EMT. At the hospital, I waited until we were alone in the examination room before I regained consciousness. I told the doctor I felt much better, that whatever had happened seemed to have passed. The blood tests they ran came back normal, and after a few hours of observation, they discharged me with instructions to follow up with my primary care physician. During the drive home, my wife kept asking how I was feeling, if I remembered what happened, if I had any idea what might have caused my collapse. Her concerns seemed genuine now, but I knew it was because she was trying to figure out why her plan had failed. Update 1. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face when she realized she'd drunk from the wrong cup. The calculated way she'd handled the emergency call. The phone conversation where she'd admitted to someone that she'd miscalculated the dose. I knew I had to gather evidence before confronting her again. The next morning, after she left for work, I searched the house thoroughly. In the back of her closet, hidden inside an old shoebox, I found a small vial of clear liquid with no label. Next to it was a notebook filled with calculations, my weight, the lethal dose needed, how to mask the taste in tea. The notebook was damning. She'd been planning this for months, documenting my daily routines, my eating habits, even my exercise schedule. She'd calculated how long it would take for symptoms to appear and how to time everything to ensure she had an alibi. There were practice runs documented where she'd given me smaller doses to test my reaction. That explained the stomach problems I'd been having for the past few weeks. The nausea, the headaches, the general feeling of being unwell. She'd been slowly poisoning me, building up to the final dose. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully returned the items to their hiding place. I needed to think about my next move carefully. Going to the police seemed obvious, but I realized I had no concrete proof that she'd actually poisoned the tea. The vial could contain anything, and the notebook, while suspicious, wasn't necessarily evidence of attempted murder. I decided to install hidden cameras around the house, small devices that could record everything without her knowledge. If she tried again, I'd have video evidence of her preparing the poison. The cameras arrived the next day, and I installed them in the kitchen, living room, and bedroom while she was at work. The setup was nearly invisible, tiny lenses hidden behind picture frames and inside decorative objects. That evening, she brought me tea again. I watched her in the kitchen through the hidden camera feed on my phone. She pulled the same vial from her purse and carefully measured drops into my cup. She stirred it thoroughly, then added extra honey to mask the taste. This time I was ready. When she handed me the tea, I thanked her and set it on the table. I told her I needed to use the bathroom first, and while she was distracted by the television, I quickly switched the cups again. I returned and sat down, pretending to drink from my cup while she absent-mindedly sipped from hers. The hidden cameras captured everything, her preparing the poison, the cup switch, and what happened next. About 30 minutes later, she began showing the same symptoms I'd experienced during my collapse. She complained of dizziness and nausea. But this time, instead of calling for help, she stumbled to the kitchen and forced herself to vomit, trying to get the poison out of her system. I followed her and asked if she was okay. Through gritted teeth, she told me she thought she had food poisoning from lunch. She spent the next hour in the bathroom, and when she finally emerged, she looked pale and shaken. She avoided making me tea for the next few days, claiming she was too sick to do much of anything. I could tell she was trying to figure out what had gone wrong with her plan. She kept checking on me, asking about my health, watching for symptoms that never came. Update 2. A week later, I decided to confront her with the evidence. I'd printed out screenshots from the cameras and made copies of the notebook pages. I waited until Sunday morning when we were both relaxed and having coffee together. I placed the photos on the kitchen table between us and asked her to explain what I was looking at. Her face went white as she recognized the images of herself preparing the poisoned tea. She tried to claim it was just adding vitamins to help with my stress, but the notebook pages told a different story. She broke down and admitted everything. The months of planning, the practice doses, the insurance money she'd been counting on. She even told me about her lover, a co-worker who'd been helping her plan my murder. They'd been having an affair for over a year, and she wanted me gone so they could be together without losing half of everything in a divorce. What shocked me most was how coldly she'd calculated my death. She'd researched my habits, my schedule, even my medical history to make sure the poisoning would look like natural causes. She'd planned to play the grieving widow for a few months before gradually revealing her new relationship. I asked her why she'd chosen poison instead of just asking for a divorce. She explained that she didn't want to split our assets or pay alimony. With me dead, she'd inherit everything. The house, my life insurance, my retirement accounts. She'd done the math, and murder was simply more profitable than divorce. The confession was being recorded by the hidden cameras, but I knew it still wouldn't be enough for the police. She could claim coercion or deny that the substance was actually poison. I needed something more concrete. That's when I came up with my final plan. I told her I forgave her. I said I understood that she'd fallen out of love and made a terrible mistake, but that we could work through it together. I suggested we go to counseling, that we could rebuild our marriage if she was willing to end the affair and commit to being honest. She was surprised by my reaction, but seemed relieved that I wasn't threatening to turn her in. Over the next few days, I played the role of the understanding husband, talking about our future together and how we could move past this betrayal. But I was actually buying time to implement my real plan. I contacted a private investigator and hired him to gather evidence of her affair. Within a week, he'd provided photos, text messages, and even recordings of conversations between my wife and her lover discussing my murder. He'd also had the liquid from the vial tested. It was indeed a lethal poison, easily obtainable online if you knew where to look. With all this evidence compiled, I finally went to the police. The combination of the hidden camera footage, the notebook, the poison analysis, and the PI's documentation of the conspiracy was overwhelming. They arrested both my wife and her lover on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. The trial was a media sensation. The hidden camera footage of her preparing the poisoned tea was played in court, along with recordings of her phone calls discussing the miscalculated dose. Her lover testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence, admitting that they'd planned my murder together and had been practicing for months. Update 3. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding her guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Her lover received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. During the sentencing phase, she finally showed genuine emotion, breaking down as she realized the magnitude of what she'd done. She apologized to me in court, claiming she'd never really wanted to hurt me, that it had all gotten out of hand. But I could see in her eyes that she was more upset about getting caught than about what she'd attempted to do. The judge wasn't swayed by her tears. He noted the premeditated nature of the crime, the months of planning, and the fact that she'd slowly been poisoning me for weeks before the final attempt. He called it one of the most calculated and cold-blooded cases he'd ever seen. I testified about the impact her actions had on my life, the paranoia, the sleepless nights, the way she'd made me question my own sanity with her gaslighting. I described how it felt to realize that the person I'd trusted most in the world had been systematically trying to murder me. The insurance companies were particularly interested in the case. They'd already paid out several policies where the circumstances were suspicious but unproven. My wife's method of using slow poisoning followed by a seemingly natural death had apparently been used before, and they suspected she might have been involved in other cases. Investigators looked into her previous relationships and discovered that her first husband had died of a sudden heart attack at 35, with no previous history of heart problems. The death had been ruled natural at the time, but they exhumed his body and found traces of the same poison in his system. She was charged with his murder as well. It turned out that murdering husbands for insurance money had been her pattern for years. She'd been married 3 times before me, and 2 of those husbands had died under suspicious circumstances. The third had divorced her before she could complete whatever plan she'd had for him. The investigation revealed a network of online forums where people shared tips on committing undetectable murders. My wife had been an active participant, sharing her successful methods and learning new techniques from others. Several other cases around the country were reopened based on information found in these forums. As for me, I'm still dealing with the psychological aftermath of discovering that my wife of 8 years had been systematically trying to kill me. I've been in therapy for months, working through the trust issues and paranoia that resulted from her betrayal. Simple things like accepting drinks from friends or eating at restaurants became sources of anxiety. The physical effects of the months of slow poisoning have mostly faded, but I still have occasional symptoms that doctors say may be permanent. The headaches come and go, and I sometimes experience nausea that seems to appear out of nowhere. I've moved to a different state and started over completely. New job, new house, new life. I kept my real name, but changed almost everything else about my identity. The media attention made it impossible to maintain any sense of normalcy where I was living. Dating has been complicated. It's hard to trust anyone after discovering that the person you shared a bed with every night was planning your death. I've started seeing someone new, but I find myself paying attention to things that never would have crossed my mind before. I notice when she asks about my health insurance or seems too interested in my daily routines. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen her search history that day. How much longer would she have continued the slow poisoning? Would I have eventually died from what appeared to be natural causes, leaving her to collect the insurance money and move on to the next victim? The hardest part is reconciling the woman I thought I knew with the person who was revealed during the investigation. For 8 years, I believed I was married to someone who loved me. I have thousands of memories of tender moments, shared jokes, intimate conversations. It's difficult to accept that all of it was a performance, that she was playing a role while planning my death. But I survived, and she didn't. In the end, her own methods were used against her, and justice was served. I may never fully trust again, but I'm alive, and she's facing the consequences of her actions. The case has been used in criminal justice courses as an example of how modern technology can be used to catch criminals who think they're being clever. The hidden cameras, the digital evidence, and the online investigation techniques that caught her network of murderers have become part of the curriculum at several law enforcement academies. I still have the hidden cameras, though I haven't used them since the trial. They're stored in a box in my closet, a reminder of the most terrifying period of my life and the lengths I had to go to save myself from someone who was supposed to love me. Every now and then, I think about that moment when I switched our cups for the final time. The look of confusion on her face when she realized something was wrong. The panic when she understood that her carefully planned murder had somehow backfired. In that instant, she experienced just a fraction of the fear and helplessness she'd been planning to inflict on me. Justice isn't always poetic, but sometimes it is.